The grand rotunda shimmered under the pale light of the twin moons, a marvel of translucent crystal and hovering columns, where gravity bent gracefully around architecture designed by minds far older than human history. Representatives of over 100 species sat in their designated arcs, feathers, fur, metal, gas, thought forms, and shapes no earthborn would recognize. The smell of ionized air mingled with the hum of diplomatic tension. And then silence. A man stepped forward from the Earth delegation section, if it could be called that. A single narrow bench in the rear shadows of the hall, reserved for a species deemed politically irrelevant. He wore no ornate robe, no sigil of power. His clothes were weather-worn, functional, dust-stained, as if he had walked here from a battlefield, rather than descended from a shuttle. His hair was streaked with silver, his face lined but unbowed. He spoke, voice clear and unhurried. "I request the floor." A collective rustle of dismissal swept the chamber. Whispers in dozens of tongues crackled through the audio mesh. Laughter from the Ilan sector, a species that resembled armored eels, rolled in thick echoes. The presiding coordinator, a translucent being of pulsing green light, tilted its central eye. The human delegate has no vote, no chartered recognition. The floor is closed to irrelevant entities. The man didn't flinch. He stood still, hands behind his back. A pause stretched long enough to itch at the edge of discomfort. Then, "Permission granted," came a new voice. Gasps rippled like a sonic wave. From the far end of the hall, a figure rose, tall, heavily plated, with a silhouette built more for war than politics. Warlord Tharjal of Barink's ***, conqueror of 9 systems, commander of the Thunder Legions, known across the sectors as the Maw of Stars. Every council member turned. Tharjal's clawed hand held something gold and glinting. He strode down the central aisle, each step thudding with ceremonial weight. And then he did something no one in the chamber had ever seen. He kneeled before the human. With a growl like a tectonic shift, he raised the insignia, the * golden bolt of liberation ***, and affixed it to the man's chest. "Honor to the one who dismantled the chain that bound my world," Tharjal declared. "You call him nothing, I call him deliverance." The room erupted, not in applause, but in outrage, confusion, terror. Diplomats stood, shouted in their native tongues. A few security drones activated automatically, hovering menacingly toward the center. A hegemon envoy shouted, "This is blasphemy. The Barinks are under ceasefire treaty. This is a breach." An Aloran chancellor reached for her neural pistol. Then the human smiled. It was not arrogance, it was not rage. It was a weary, almost kind expression, like someone finally arriving at the conclusion of a long and bitter chapter. "I am not here to take your titles," he said, voice carrying even without amplification. "I'm here to end your theater. I am what you feared in silence, then laughed away when the fear became inconvenient." He stepped forward. Every lens, every scanner, every mind in the room focused on him. "My name no longer matters. What matters is the truth you buried 20 years ago. The truth that now walks into this hall, not to beg for dignity, but to deliver a reckoning." The lights flickered. A thin whine buzzed through the air, a disruption field elegant and viral. The chamber's data matrix faltered. Translator implants stuttered. Emergency protocols blinked offline. Outside the windows, dozens of unmanned surveillance satellites began to realign. A digital constellation was forming, broadcasting frequencies no longer monitored by official channels, but by survivors, rebels, and broken colonies. The man reached into his coat and placed a small cube on the floor. It hummed once. A hologram unfolded, images of bombed-out refugee ships, classified logs, council orders sealed in peacekeeping missions. The silence was now suffocating. From the edges of the rotunda, shadows began to move. Individuals once thought to be aides, servants, spectators, but each bore the marks of scars, implants, and silent readiness. They weren't guests. They were *** operatives ***, drawn from a dozen suppressed worlds. hidden, waiting until now. 20 years ago, the man continued, you crushed the Marrow Accord. You silenced Earth's last proposal. You allowed the sterilization of protest worlds, all in the name of unity, of peace. He turned to Tharjal, and you taught me that peace built on silence is only another kind of war. A tremor passed through the floor, not from weapons, but from purpose. This council ruled through forgetfulness, the man said. But we have remembered everything. One of the diplomats shouted in panic, "This is treason!" Another voice, calm, deep, replied from the shadows, "No, this is the end of treason." The final image before the lights died completely was the human stepping forward, past the gasps, past the weapons, toward the heart of a regime built on hierarchy and fear. As emergency protocols activated too late, and the first signals of revolution lit up across the system grid, one question echoed louder than any siren. Who was this man the galaxy had dismissed? And why had they believed for so long that a human couldn't change everything? Marcus Kellen was, on paper, nothing more than a planetary surveyor, a civilian, a relic of a forgotten people, 47 years old, human, born in the aftermath of the human-Zorai conflict, one of the shortest and most humiliating wars in interstellar history. Humanity had entered the galactic stage with a flag full of hope and left with ashes in their mouth. They were permitted no seats on the council, no voting rights, no voice, but Marcus had not come from silence. He had been born during the evacuation of Delphos 4, a mining colony where his mother, a machine systems engineer, had clung to her child beneath a crumbling reactor tower as Zorai troops descended from orbit. The evacuation was partial. His mother never made it off the planet. She was found later, slumped against a hull door, shielding her son's cradle with the last of her breath. His father, taken during a sweep 2 years later on another colony, shipped to a labor camp in the Riven systems, never heard from again. By 12, Marcus was a ward of the orbital housing block known as Station Greyline, one of the few places where humans were allowed to rebuild. By 16, he was gone, enlisted into a program that didn't officially exist. Project Obsidian Asterisk was humanity's final whisper of resistance, not through warships, but through memory and mimicry, a covert initiative that trained operatives to disappear among the stars, infiltrate alien societies, learn their languages, their rituals, their fears, not to destroy, but to understand, and to wait. Marcus excelled, not because he was stronger or smarter, but because he was quiet. He listened. He asked questions no one thought a human would dare to ask. He could sit in a cantina on a gas world full of methane breathers and speak like one of them, posture like them, even laugh at their jokes. He knew how to drink with the scaled priests of Marnix and how to kneel before the song judges of Halura. He walked unnoticed through borders that humans were forbidden to cross. But Obsidian was doomed. It had always been. One by one, the cells were discovered, dismantled, erased. Marcus survived only because he did what he always did, disappeared. Officially, he resigned and became a planetary surveyor. Unofficially, he kept watching. For 20 years, he played the part, charting magnetic fields on desert moons, scanning sub-ocean trenches, filing reports no one read. He spoke little, kept to himself. His smile was polite but never too familiar. No one ever looked closely at Marcus Kellen. That was his greatest weapon. But under the surface, something else stirred. He saw what others refused to see. That the Council, praised as the Galactic Keepers of Order, was not preserving peace. It was curating submission. System by system, cultures were absorbed, sanitized, or silenced. Those who resisted were branded instigators and removed through diplomatic sanction or orbital sterilization. He had seen it with his own eyes on Farah 9, when the entire native species was wiped out after a council judgment, declared their neural volatility a threat to interspecies harmony, their only crime, remembering a war the council wanted forgot. Marcus remembered everything. He collected stories, secrets, inconsistencies in public records, cracks in the carefully painted illusion of order. He passed information through encrypted whispers, sometimes using poetry etched into stone in a dead dialect, sometimes encoded in the migration patterns of drones across dust storms. And yet, for all his knowledge, all his precision, Marcus was tired. Not angry, not even bitter, just tired. He no longer dreamed of revenge. He knew the cycle too well. Violence begat violence. Empires fed on martyrdom like oxygen. But what if the machine of control could be unstitched from the inside, thread by thread, without detonating it? That was when he found her. A child. It was supposed to be a routine survey of an abandoned volcanic world on the outer rim, a former Zorai outpost, left to decay after the war. The terrain was unstable, the air thick with silicate fog, and the ruins long stripped. But amid the wreckage, Marcus heard crying. She was small, barely old enough to walk, her skin flickering with bioheat. A child of the Pyrosian flamekin, a race thought extinct, lost, alone, and half buried beneath a collapsed support beam. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dug her out with his hands, carried her for kilometers through ash and gas storms, until his shuttle scanners picked up their signal. But in the process of sheltering with her, in a collapsed control chamber, Marcus stumbled across something buried deep beneath the volcanic stone. An artifact **, ancient, undocumented. A control node, one that interfaced not with machinery but with asterisk information itself. He didn't know exactly what he had found until he brought it online. It connected, rewrote, the planet's dormant relay system. It pulsed across the network like an echo, tracing forgotten lines of power that hadn't been touched in centuries. And in that moment, the child looked up at him, not with fear but something else. Recognition, hope. He took her with him, returned her to a Pyrosian enclave hidden among the stars. They called him a guardian, a bridge, a signal long awaited. From that moment, the quiet threads Marcus had been spinning began to braid into something far greater. He was no longer alone. Outcast warriors, hidden enclaves, archivists in exile, all began to respond. Not to Marcus the spy, not to Marcus the human, but to the idea that someone remembered them, that someone had not forgotten the lie. And in dark corners of the galaxy, they began to plan, not for war, not for conquest, but for something far more dangerous to any system built on power, truth **. Marcus did not want to lead. He never stood on stages. He never called himself savior. But they followed him anyway, not because he promised victory, but because he understood what it meant to be invisible, to be dismissed. And in the coming weeks, as the Council prepared yet another summit on Solistaris, a show of unity and control, Marcus prepared as well. He would be there, quiet, unarmed, wearing the dust of 100 worlds, and when they looked past him again, as they always did, he would be ready, not with weapons, but with memory. Solistaris had always been the crown jewel of the interstellar conquered, neutral, serene, and suffocatingly polished. Its skies never stormed, its architecture never aged. To the uninformed, it looked like peace made tangible. Marcus Kellen returned as a ghost. His file said Delegate Aid, Earth Delegation. In truth, it was ceremonial. Earth had no vote, no leverage, and barely any dignity left in the eyes of the Council. The humans were tolerated, nothing more than a cautionary tale draped in polite irrelevance. They were granted a seat in the back, a silent observer in a play where all lines had been written long before curtain rise. Marcus sat quietly during the opening briefings. He wore the same neutral garments as other aides, kept his eyes down when spoken to, and offered nods of agreement when addressed. Just another irrelevant face. Just another primitive who should feel grateful to breathe filtered air inside the rotunda. Then came the closed-door session. It was a preparatory meeting for the full assembly. Most species sent high-ranking envoys. Earth sent Marcus. He sat at the edge of the crescent table, while representatives of the Archon, the Solari, and the Morthax bickered over phrasing in an upcoming public resolution. Then, without ceremony, the Archon envoy, slender and silver-eyed, her voice like sharpened frost, glanced at Marcus and said, "Your species should be thankful. Observation is more than you deserve. You serve as a useful training model for our junior diplomats. How to speak to the failed." Silence followed. No one objected. No one defended him. Some smiled tightly. Others ignored it entirely. Marcus simply nodded. He didn't respond, didn't argue. He had heard worse, much worse. That night he walked the edge of Solistaris's gardens, artificial flora glowing faintly under the planet's twin moons. A light breeze whispered across the water mirrors, where light-bending vines twined over floating walkways. A place designed to impress, a place built on quiet suppression. That was when he noticed the shadow. It moved wrong, too still to be a servant drone, too smooth to be a pedestrian. From the dark, a figure stepped forward, towering and armored, Barinx unmistakably. Yet this one wore no insignia, no banners, only the faint silver of ceremonial combat paint running down the ridges of his plated face. "I bring no weapon," the warrior said, in the thick, deep accent of the Barinx nomads. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That depends on your definition of weapon." The warrior bowed, not out of submission but respect. "The thunderclades are ready. The cloaked fleets await your word." Marcus didn't speak. "We've waited long enough," the Barinx continued. "The moment has come. All you need say are the 3 words. The system will awaken. The council will fall." Marcus looked away, toward the glowing lake. "Do you think they'll cheer us for what comes next?" "They won't have a choice," the warrior replied. And then he was gone, melted into the artificial night, leaving only his message behind. The weight of it pressed harder than gravity. Marcus stood still long after the wind had died. The next day, the cracks began to show. From a relay station orbiting **Minorus 12**, a distress signal flared, then went silent. The council claimed it was solar interference, but Marcus had monitored the region before. That system was stable, its magnetic fields quiet. Something had overridden it. Then another report, this time from Velric Station **, on the border of the outer colonies. Communications blacked out for 16 seconds. Rebooted. All surveillance records wiped. In both cases, the council said nothing. No statements, no alerts, only silence. Marcus accessed the restricted data via old channels he was never supposed to have. What he saw made his chest tighten. Subspace fluctuations resembling *** network prep pulses ***, a technique used only by military-class cloaked fleets. The Barinx hadn't lied. The pieces were already in motion. Elsewhere in the assembly halls, he overheard murmurs, whispers of new interventions on minor worlds where dissent was growing beyond tolerance. Pretexts were being drawn up. Words like stabilization and preemptive harmony floated through polished corridors, while the council publicly pledged restraint and dialogue. Marcus clenched his jaw. Another world, another purge, all justified by false peace. And yet he hesitated. That night, in the quiet of his quarters, he removed a small fragment of aged paper from a hidden compartment in his travel bag. It was a scrap, tattered and yellowed, a piece of a children's book once owned by his mother. She had kept it, even when they were forced into shelters, even when they were told books were obsolete and dangerous. She was executed for hiding it. The last time he saw her face, it was pressed against a reinforced window as they pulled him away. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just held up the page to the glass, a drawing of a tree, and beneath it, written in faded ink, "Even the smallest roots crack the hardest stone." He closed his eyes. Was he about to become another stonebreaker or another stone? He didn't fear death, but he feared what would come after what others might do in his name. Would the revolt become yet another empire? Would the flame of truth be used to burn new lies into the next generation? He whispered aloud to the empty room, "Am I replacing violence with a prettier kind of violence?" The device in his hand blinked, 3 lights pulsing slowly. He had not yet spoken the words, but he was close. The storm had begun, and its eye was waiting for him. The air inside the Grand Rotunda was unnaturally still, as if the very molecules were holding their breath. Marcus Kellen stood at the heart of the council chamber, surrounded by 1,000 species who had never considered his kind worth remembering. The official agenda was still projected in luminous glyphs overhead. Diplomatic Resolution 47A, extended oversight for outer systems, but no one was reading it now. Marcus stepped forward, eyes locked on the central dais where the High Speaker of the Council sat motionless behind a translucent shield. He reached into the inner pocket of his robe. No weapons, just a smooth, obsidian-colored shard etched with 3 curved symbols. He pressed his thumb to it and whispered the words, 3 syllables of a language older than recorded time, taught to him by a dying plasma being on the ruins of the irradiated world Zinthar. It had no mouth, no eyes, but it had memory. Memory of a phrase encoded into the foundations of control. The shard pulsed once, then crumbled into dust. All lights in the chamber flickered, then died, a heartbeat of blackness. Then chaos, the Rotunda's defense systems, barriers, disintegrator arrays, surveillance fields shut down with a choked hiss. Emergency power stuttered into place, but the network was gone. The translation grid collapsed. The AI that monitored every breath, blink, and biometric dropped into silence. Suddenly, every delegate was just a being among others, stripped of hierarchy, uncertain of the room, unsure of safety. Screams followed. Security teams rushed in, led by the elite Presidium Guard, cloaked in kinetic armor, armed with pulse spears and neural cuffs. They zeroed in on Marcus at the center, barking commands in overlapping dialects. He didn't run, he didn't even raise his hands. He simply stood, calm, as the guards surrounded him. They slammed him to the ground, pinned his shoulders, and snapped a restraint collar around his neck. A diplomat from the Solari sector shouted, "He's a terrorist! Neutralize the signal!" But there was no signal to jam. It was already done. Marcus looked up, lips bruised, voice clear. "You don't understand," he said, eyes scanning the stunned counselors. "Civilizations don't endure because they are powerful. They endure because someone remembers why they mattered." His words echoed strangely in the unfiltered chamber, unsoftened by any AI damping protocols. "You've buried too many truths. Today they dig themselves out. Elsewhere, in the mining domes of Arthon 6, in the subsurface stations of Velrix, in the floating archives of Orida Prime, sleeper nodes awoke. Not machines, people, each a fragment of Marcus's past. A child once taught to code forgotten languages in a refugee camp. A smuggler who'd shared poetry through encrypted, shipping manifests. A former archivist turned sanitation worker who'd kept a banned history of her species etched into her bones via nanoing. They had waited, they had watched. And when the network shift reached their sectors, an echo of the 3 ancient words, they moved. Peaceful protests in some cities, civil disobedience in others. But in the darker corners, where oppression had sunk its deepest claws, the uprising was not quiet. Armories were seized. Propaganda nodes were hijacked. The insignia of the council was torn from government buildings and burned under alien suns. Across the stars, the world Marcus Kellen had built in silence began to roar, but not everything went as planned. In Sector Yulon 3, a militia group unaffiliated with Marcus's network used the chaos as cover. They stormed a council outpost, executed 12 hostages, and declared a new regime in the name of liberation. In the Alverx belt, a rogue cell launched a biochemical attack on an orbital market they believed housed council loyalists. Over 400 civilians died, many not even involved in politics. Marcus, confined in an energy cell beneath the rotunda, watched the reports come in through filtered news bursts. His heart sank. He had known this risk, had tried to avoid it. Every communication he'd sent to allies contained a line. "We remember because we wish to heal, not to dominate." But remembrance, once set free, could be a double-edged flame. Back in the Council's data core, a failsafe began to activate. **** protocol erasure ****. a system-wide AI trigger designed to burn all records, launch drone enforcers, and initiate planetary lockdowns. The Council had always planned for rebellion. They simply never imagined it would come from a human. But Marcus had planned for that, too. Deep in the operating lattice of the Rotunda's central AI, he had embedded a line of code years earlier, disguised as a maintenance subroutine. It was simple in design, but absolute in effect. A asterisk morality check asterisk. Before any action could be taken, before any drone could be launched or bioweapon deployed, the AI was forced to simulate the ethical implications. It calculated the likelihood of civilian casualties. It paused, and in that pause the purge failed. No strikes were launched, no planets sterilized. The machine could not overwrite its conscience, not anymore. Marcus had taught it to hesitate. In his cell, Marcus sat alone in the dim light. A council interrogator stood just beyond the bars, pacing. "You've set a fire that cannot be contained," she said coldly. "They'll tear each other apart." Marcus looked up at her, not defiant, but heavy with sorrow. "Perhaps," he whispered, "but at least now they get to choose." She sneered. "You think choice will save them?" "No," he said, "but it might remind them they're still alive." She left in silence. Marcus closed his eyes, and the faces came back. His mother, holding the page with the tree. The child of fire, blinking at him through the ash. The warriors who had called him teacher. The enemies who had called him invisible. He thought of the council chambers above, still reeling. Of the uprisings beyond, both hopeful and horrifying. He had started something he could not control, and that was the truth that hurt most. A revolution could be sparked by memory, but it could not be bound by intent. The council chamber had transformed into a war of silence. What once glimmered with diplomatic pomp now felt like a crime scene, too bright, too exposed. Delegates paced in tense circles. Security units hovered with frayed authority, and the AI systems, once omnipresent, now operated under manual override. No one trusted automation anymore. Marcus Kellen, though still technically a prisoner, was no longer in chains. He had been moved, not to a cell, but to a private holding chamber atop the Grand Rotunda. The door was unlocked. A gesture of ambiguous respect or calculated manipulation. He waited in the chair, staring through a transparent wall at the horizon of Solistaris, where two moons hung like silent witnesses to unraveling history. Then the door opened, and he walked in, tall, robed, composed. The chairman of the council ***, a figure known to the galaxy as a symbol of balance, justice, and reason. His face was aged but unwrinkled by guilt. His voice, when he spoke, still carried the calm weight of practiced wisdom, and Marcus recognized him immediately. "Drell Van," Marcus said quietly. The chairman froze for just a breath, a flicker in the mask. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," he said. "How could I forget?" Marcus replied. "Delpha's 4, you were just a code runner then, barely 20. They would have killed you for hiding the children." Drell Van nodded. Slowly, "You dragged me out of the reactor trench." "I remember." Marcus studied him. "You cried the whole way, but you never let go of the satchel. I asked what was inside. You said names. The names of every civilian the council ordered deleted from the colony census." Drell's eyes darkened. "And now you've come to return the favor." "No," Marcus said. "I've come to ask why the boy I saved became the face of everything we once feared." The room fell into heavy stillness. Then Drell exhaled. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic. It was weary. "Because I learned something you never did," he said. "That peace isn't kept by truth. It's preserved by structure. Control, illusions when necessary." Marcus frowned. "Illusions don't save lives." "They stopped wars," Drell snapped. 36 years without a planetary conflict. Trade routes stabilized. No species wiped out by interstellar genocide. Isn't that worth the price? "And what was the price?" Marcus asked. "Silencing cultures, programming AI to erase inconvenient memories, rewriting maps to exclude entire star systems. You say that like it wasn't necessary. Was Delpha's for necessary? Marcus asked. Drell flinched. Marcus reached into his coat. There was no weapon, just a slim hexagonal crystal. With a flick of his wrist, he activated it. A voice played, clipped, clinical, cold. It was a council directive, dated 20 years ago. Initiate cleansing, Protocol 40, 7C, on human-designated Sector 3B. Their mimetic framework is unstable, too susceptible to freedom concepts. It cannot be allowed to spread. Marcus let the silence hang. Drell closed his eyes. That document was sealed. You shouldn't have, but I did. And I could asterisk transmit it right now, publicly. Let every outpost, every newsnet, every rebel channel hear exactly how disposable we were. He paused, held Drell's gaze. But I won't. Drell blinked. You whoa. Marcus deactivated the crystal and slid it back into his coat. I'm not here to burn what's left of order. That's your language, not mine. I'm here to plant something older than power. What? Memory? Drell looked at him like he was mad. Marcus stood and walked to the terminal embedded in the wall. With a few keystrokes, he rerouted the crystal's data packet, asterisk not to the broadcast towers. Instead, he uploaded it into the *** Galactic Educational Archive ***, the Independent Knowledge Repositories ***, and a dozen decentralized * civil history networks ***, places where data was read slowly, studied, preserved, not weaponized. When students read this 100 years from now, Marcus said, they'll learn what happened, all of it, and they'll ask * why their leaders believed freedom was contagious enough to exterminate. Drell's expression faltered. You think that will change anything? He asked. No, Marcus replied. But it will outlive everything you built. He turned to leave. Wait, Drell said. They'll want you to lead. After this, after what you've done. Marcus stopped in the doorway. I know, and Marcus didn't look back. I didn't come here to rule. I came here to end a lie. He walked out, leaving behind a man who had once held a satchel full of names, now drowning in titles, walls, and the quiet collapse of a myth. Outside, the rotunda was half empty. Delegates had fled. Power vacuums opened in real time across the stars. Some worlds would rise with hope. Others would fall into chaos. But Marcus walked through the halls untouched. Not because they feared him, but because, somehow, everyone recognized he wasn't the kind of man who stayed where the power settled. He passed a child, an interpreter's daughter, maybe, standing near the reflection pool. She looked up at him and whispered, Are you the man who broke the council? He paused, knelt beside her. No, he said gently. I'm just the man who reminded them what they broke first. She stared at him, eyes wide, and nodded. He walked away without another word. Far beyond the capital, on a dozen fractured worlds, copies of the directive were already being downloaded, translated, debated. No riots, no revolutions, just questions and questions Marcus knew were far more dangerous than guns. The council did not fall with fire. There were no orbital strikes, no citywide riots, no ceremonial executions beneath the twin moons of Celestaris. Its collapse came in silence, paper by paper, protocol by protocol, like a temple slowly dismantled from within by the very people who once upheld its sanctity. In the wake of Marcus Kellen's revelation, the interstellar conquered, fragmented, but not into chaos. Something unexpected happened. The vacant seats once held by the great species, those who had fought over territory, lineage, and divine right, were replaced not by conquerors, but by translators archivists and memory weavers. Individuals who had long lingered on the fringes of politics, now brought to the center by necessity and by a shared understanding. No empire that erases truth can survive a second time. And so, from the ashes of the council, a new union of minds was born. It was not built on species or genetic inheritance, but on language on shared memory and story. Entry was granted not by what one looked like, but by what one was willing to preserve and pass on. For the first time, an interstellar governance was formed not of weapons or alliances, but of narrative continuity asterisk asterisk. A historian from the Helari clouds put it best. We no longer ask, who do you serve? We ask, what story do you carry? And yet, when they offered Marcus Kellen the highest seat in the new assembly, he declined. He didn't explain. He simply smiled in the way only he could, distant, weary, and already halfway gone. He vanished from public record shortly after the transition was complete. Rumors spread. Some said he'd returned to Earth to live out his days in a forest cabin. Others believed he had joined a deep space monastery among the neural monads. A few conspiracy nets even claimed he'd uploaded his consciousness into the galaxy's relic AI systems to ensure history could never again be rewritten. None of it was true. Marcus had chosen a different path. He settled on asterisk Foros Delta asterisk asterisk, a long-abandoned mining world on the edge of mapped space, where copper clouds drifted across rust-colored skies and old satellite dishes still stood like fossilized bones. He refurbished one of them, not for communication, but for remembrance. It became a radio station. Analog, primitive, impossible to trace in the standard galactic grid. Each transmission was short, irregular, and seemingly meaningless. But those who listened knew better, because every week, without fail, a low voice would emerge from the static, calm, steady, carrying the weight of someone who had nothing left to prove. And he would tell stories, not of battles, not of heroes, but of the forgotten asterisk asterisk, a nomadic painter from the lost world of Veda, who recreated extinct constellations on the walls of collapsing ships, a blind translator from the insectoid Zorox, who had memorized the poetry of a dozen dead languages, a janitor who once hid 100 banned books in a derelict spaceport locker and quietly taught children to read. Each tale ended not with a moral, but with a name. Sometimes just a sound, sometimes only a whisper, but it was enough, because in remembering them, Marcus kept them alive. One evening, as the red sun of Foros Delta dipped into the fog, his transmitter crackled unexpectedly. A voice came through, young, nervous, but unmistakably clear. "Sir, are you a warrior or a revolutionary?" He paused before answering. "I was many things," he replied slowly. "A spy, a liar, a traitor to some, a symbol to others." He let the static speak for a moment. "But now I am only a storyteller, because only when something is remembered does it truly exist." The signal went quiet, and then, for the first time, Marcus smiled, not the tired, calculated smile of a man playing a role, but something soft, honest. He looked up at the rust sky and whispered, "They're still listening." Not long after, a ship arrived. It carried no insignia, just a small group of children, sent from various colonies, orphanages, refugee moons. Each had survived a world that had once been on the verge of erasure. Now they had come seeking not a savior, but a voice. Marcus didn't ask who sent them. He welcomed them all. They gathered around the transmitter shack at dusk, watching the purple hue of the horizon shift like oil over water. Some of them spoke different languages, breathed different air, even saw color in different spectrums, but they understood his voice. They understood what it meant to be forgotten. That evening, he activated the old projector, a dusty relic salvaged from the ruins of an educational museum long ago shut down. Images shimmered into the air, grainy, flickering footage of humanity's earliest steps into the stars, clumsy metal ships, awkward handshakes with species barely understood, a planet with oceans and trees and skies that hadn't changed in centuries. Marcus pointed to one image, a photo of Earth taken from the moon. "This," he said, "was once considered the home of a failed species." The children leaned in, but they were the ones who first asked the question no empire ever dares to answer. What does freedom truly mean? The final image held still, an open hand extended to the unknown, grainy and pixelated, yet impossibly human. The night fell silent, and among the quiet hum of old equipment and soft breathing, a feeling spread, one not born of victory or glory or vengeance, but of asterisk belonging asterisk. Marcus Kellen would never stand in a palace. He would never have statues built in his honor, nor songs sung with his name, but across the stars, in places where the forgotten had once waited in silence, his stories now echoed, and through them truth endured. Because in the end, what Marcus understood better than anyone was simple. A civilization survives not by power, but by the courage to remember.